Hi, I'm Adam from the Garage Woodworker, and today we're going to make this shadow box. This project started on the computer. The first thing I had to do was make templates for all the layers. I decided on the photo I wanted to use, well, two photos. And instead of using the trees in the photo, I thought it would look better to use some 2D clip arts from Google. And also cut out some clouds in the sky for LEDs to shine through. After cutting each layer out, I made it into a black silhouette. And then thinking of how things would be held in place. For instance, to hold my wife in place, I put her next to the trees so that the trees would hold her in place. I thought it would look better to cut myself out separately and then glue myself on top on a separate layer. For my son, I needed to add a bit to the bottom so that he would be floating. Now this part would be hidden by the grass. I also added a border to each layer. That would help me keep everything in the border and all the layers the same size. Now that I had the layers printed out, I could measure the size of the box and cut pieces of MDF to size on the table saw. I used 3mm MDF for each layer. Using a Stanley knife and straight edge, I cut out the templates and glued them onto the MDF blanks. And then using a drill, I drilled holes into the parts that will be cut away to be able to pass the scroll saw blade through. I then got out my scroll saw and started the long process of cutting each layer. If you don't have a scroll saw, there are many ways to cut these out. You need a bandsaw, but keeping in mind you would have to cut through the border. You could also use a coping saw or even a Stanley knife.
Later.
Okay, so I finished cutting out all the pieces. Doesn't look like much now, but once all the pieces are separated into layers and I make the frame, they're going to sit approximately 3mm apart from each other. You'll be able to see each layer a little bit better. Also, once it's painted and everything as well, it'll look a lot better. I then glued myself in place and left it to dry. The next day I started by painting all the layers. This was the last day I had to work on this, so I was a bit rushed. Before moving the fence on the table saw, I cut the acrylic. While the paint was drying, I made the frame. I started by running some boards through the thicknesser. And this is where I worked out why my dust collection stopped working. I've somehow lost the footage to this, but I cut out the slots in the frame for the MDF and the acrylic on the table saw. Now that I had the slots cut, I cut the frame to size with my miter saw. Next was dry assembly. This is where I discovered I had messed up all my measurements and cut all the framing pieces too short. But I was running out of time and I thought, how could I fix this? Instead of doing it all over again, I decided I would glue it all in place and then come up with a solution while they were drying. 30 minutes later, I marked out a line with a marking knife along the acrylic to sand down to, so that the top would fit on the frame. After applying clamps, I checked for squareness by measuring the diagonals. I glued this piece of acrylic over the cloud holes with hot glue. To fix the corners, I decided to cut them off and add a contrasting wood. So I marked a 45-degree line in one of the corners, took the box over to my miter saw and cut the corner off. I then used my stop block to make all four corners the same. I glued on some off-cut pieces of Merbau, using tape to hold them in place until I could apply clamps. "30 minutes later, I sanded the sides of the box until the corners were flush. I then used the table saw to trim the box to final width. Using hot glue, I attached these scrap pieces of MDF, all the same distance from the edge to hold the back panel in place. I added LEDs and a switch to the back panel and held it in place with a couple of screws. After sanding the entire box with 220 grit, I added masking tape to the acrylic so that I can apply boiled linseed oil all over without the risk of getting it on the acrylic.
Okay, so that concludes the shadow box build. There is a couple of things I'm not happy with. I got some dust in there after sealing it up and I can't get it out. It's actually quite infuriating. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm happy with the corners. They turned out a lot better than what I thought they were going to. If you liked my video, hit that subscribe button down below. Maybe leave a like rating. Also, comment down below what you thought of the music I used. I know a lot of people aren't into metal music, but myself am a metalhead, and I thought no one else uses metal music, and I might see what other people think of it. I'll see you next time.